candidates are ready, please welcome to participate in tonight's debate for the 8th, Congressman Joe Walsh and Lieutenant Colonel Tammy Duckworth. I got to make this announcement. There is a tan Buick Enclave parked outside that is about to be towed. License plate NI58961. So, if you're Rolling Meadows Police Department, you know, all village governments could use the money. You don't have to donate. So, if that's your car, go out and move it, or else it's going to be towed. So, let me go over the rules one more time. We are going to have a lively debate. Please get all that excitement and the cheering out of the way, because we don't want to turn this into a shouting match. We want to turn it into a serious discussion on the issues that face this country. And Dick Kay and Steve Cochran have said to me personally that they will be terse, cogent, and on point. And if you believe that, so, Marcus, 4 minutes. This is called tap dancing in the radio business. Well, Steve and Dick, why don't you greet the audience in your own inimitable way? Steve, go first.
Ladies and gentlemen, Dick Kay.
And the inimitable Steve Cochran.
Notice I'm that serious. This is, go ahead, Steve.
Did that help? Did that help?
Oh, it's unbelievable. I mean, Woodward and Bernstein are eating their hearts out. Go ahead.
No, on behalf of everybody at WIND, it's an honor to be here, and I thank you guys very much for coming out and committing to the process. You ought to be proud of yourself, regardless of who you're supporting. So thanks for being here.
WCPT, only 3 hours on Saturday afternoon. I'm proud to be here. I'm glad to have a lot of you listeners here from WCPT. You're to be congratulated for participating, and thank you for coming out tonight. Yeah!
I didn't know Dick was going to do a plug. The Steve Cochran Show, 5 to 7, Monday through Friday.
Never miss a chance, Steve.
You know, I'm beginning to feel a lot like Jim Lehrer. Anyway, the way the system goes, Marcus, how long? I have a chance to explain the format? 3 minutes. Oh, it's a lifetime. It's 3 minutes, round one. After we go on the air at 7:06, each candidate, starting with Congressman Walsh, will have a 1:30 open. Each candidate will have that, and then we'll start the questionings. I will lead the first round. And at 7:25 we break, and after that we have round 2, and that's when Mr. Cochran and Mr. Kay will be asking the questions. Then round 3, all hell's going to break loose, because it's the panelists asking questions in no particular order to the candidates, but the moderator, who is the white line down the middle of the road, will make sure that it's equal, balanced, and everyone has a fair shot, especially at the 2 panelists. And then from that, we will ask questions, the text questions from the audience. And at the end, each candidate will have a chance to give a closing statement. The order will be the same. Mr. Walsh first, Ms. Duckworth second. So that's how the debate's going to go. And trust me on this one point that I'm firm. At 8:50, notice how he gives me the thumb up, we'll be going off the air. So that is... Oh, if you have a cell phone, if you turn it off, it'll be tough to text. So, I mean,
I think shut the ringer off would suffice. Put it on vibrate. Yeah.
Put it on vibrate. But You know, I was in charge for around 30 seconds around here. You know, when you're in class and you have all the students who need grades, what leverage. All right, now, Mr. Marcus, what do you, God, 2 minutes. Hey, how about standing up for the Pledge of Allegiance? There you go, we have a flag. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. There'll be a collection box at the end to get a real big flag for this, so the next time they have a debate, we don't have to have the, I think those are the ones you put on your car's keys. The text number? Text number again, just give me a second, I'll be there, you know. I have this in order, you know. To text the... Keep going, you're doing fine.
It's on the screen. It's on the screen.
As I said, it's on the screen. I'm a final... Marcus, we have 7 more minutes? No, only 1 now. If you were counting... well, this will show my age. Were you counting on that at the bell for the second Tunney Dempsey fight? Who remembers that fight? Soldier Field, the long count fight. Your grandfather. Well, my dad was there. All right, so we're going to let's have a little quiet. We're done. Here we go. 6 minutes of the news, and we'll be back at you. Well, I want you all to contemplate silently. What do you think of this great contest between Walsh and Duckworth? Think to yourself, ponder, and come up with a damn good question. 2 seconds. Good evening. Welcome to WCPT debate between Congressman Joe Walsh and his challenger, Tammy Duckworth. On behalf of AM 560 and WCPT, I welcome you to this program. I'm Paul Green from Roosevelt University. We are live at the Meadows Club in Rolling Meadows in front of a live audience where tonight we'll be asking questions and hearing answers from 2 candidates running for the 8th Congressional District in Illinois. These candidates are Congressman Joe Walsh and his challenger, Lieutenant Colonel Tammy Duckworth. Joe Walsh is the Republican, Tammy Duckworth is the Democrat. I'm also joined by AM 560 Steve Cochran and WCPT's Dick Kay. They will be joining me tonight and asking questions of the candidates, and we will have a very lively and a very exciting debate. The candidates will be asked questions by myself and one of the other panelists. They will have 2 minutes to answer, and the person who will have the other candidate will have 1 minute and 30 seconds to respond. Throughout the evening, as the moderator and arbitrator of fairness, I will make sure that each side has the proper time and no one goes too long. So, tonight we begin with opening statements. There was a flip of the coin. Mr. Walsh won the flip. He will have 1 minute and 30 seconds to open this debate. Mr. Congressman Walsh, you're on.
Thank you, Paul. Thank you all for having me. Ladies and gentlemen, tonight you will hear my opponent answer almost every single question with nice, poll-tested, canned answers like, let's roll up our sleeves and let's get to work. What you won't hear her tell you is that she has established a long track record at the Illinois VA as a failed bureaucrat who wasted taxpayers' dollars while using her position of power to further political causes that she supported. And I hope that's a topic we get to talk about tonight. You're going to hear her say that she will not balance the budget on the backs of our most vulnerable. What you won't hear is Ms. Duckworth offer any real solutions on how she will balance the budget. Instead, you'll get a few anecdotes, a few small cuts that won't amount to a hill of beans. You'll hear her standard line that she supports ending tax cuts for millionaires and billionaires to help fund Medicare. What you won't hear her say is that those taxes she wants to impose are really aimed at small businesses, and that Tammy actually supports the President's health care plan that guts Medicare by $760 million. You will hear her say that she will work with anyone who loves this country as much as she does.
Ms. Duckworth, you have 1 minute and 32 seconds.
Well, thank you again. Thank you everyone for giving up yourself tonight and being here. You are practicing our democracy, which is something that is precious in the world indeed. So thank you for coming out on both sides to listen to the candidates. I think that what's the most important part of what you're going to hear tonight, at least for me, I hope, is a better understanding of who I am and how I make decisions. Because, you know, 6 months from now, a year from now, we may have questions that we've not even thought about. And I think you should know that when I make my decisions, it's based on my personal experiences. If it were not for food stamps and Pell Grants and student loans and teachers who bought me dinner, if it were not for just plain old hard work by my families, I would not have been able to have achieved what I've achieved in life. Had I not been supported all along the way when my family were on our knees and needed that helping hand to get back up on our feet, I would not have been able to become one of the first women to fly combat missions in Iraq. And that is all part of the American dream. And all I want to do is to make sure that when you're on your knees and you need a helping hand and you're not willing to give up, then we're not going to give up on you either. This debate is not about who's going to be president or who's going to be a speaker. What this debate is about is this nation. Are we going to serve her? Are we going to serve our community? And who is the best servant to the public? Who's going to take care of the people of this district? Who's going to serve the people of this district? Who's going to represent it with the responsibilities of the office of Congressperson of the 8th Congressional District? So I'm going to Washington.
Thank you, Ms. Duckworth. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Let's memorial applaud the less we hear from the candidates. I start off the round. The first question is to you, Ms. Duckworth. The presidential race has tightened in the last week or so. My question is a simple two-part question. How do you see that contest impacting your 8th district campaign? And two, if you and President Obama are elected, how independent do you see yourself in Congress representing the 8th district?
Very independent, because the job is representative of the 8th Congressional District of Illinois. I'm not going to Washington to say yes to everything the president wants. I'm also not going to Washington to say no to everything that Speaker Boehner wants either. It doesn't matter who's going to be president, and it doesn't matter who's going to be speaker, because the problems in the 8th Congressional District are still going to be jobs and the economy. My small businesses are still going to be wondering about the insecurities that come with the gridlock that's in Washington. We're going to need still to have Elgin O'Hare Expressway start in Elgin and end in O'Hare. When I've gone and met with mayors across the district, they've said the same thing: transportation, transportation, transportation. The bill that my opponent was the only member of the entire Illinois bipartisan coalition to vote against. He's voted against this district time and again. He's not there to serve this district. He's there to serve the Tea Party, and that simply is not good enough.
Please, go ahead, Ms. Duckworth.
Absolutely. So the choice is clear. Do you want more of the same partisan gridlock? I mean, I'm so proud to have gotten both the Tribune and the Daily Herald's endorsement this week, and they said the same thing: end the gridlock, end the vitriol, end the lack of movement in Washington. Let's get to work. Yes, I do say roll up our sleeves and get to work. I do say compromise. I I do say let's work together, because frankly, that's what the people of the 8th Congressional District want. They don't want to be yelled at anymore. They want somebody to listen to them and get to work serving them in Washington instead of being the poster child for the Tea Party.
Mr. Congressman Walsh, you have 1 minute and 30 seconds to respond, but because the professor's running the show, we'll give a slightly different response. First part of the question is the same. The presidential race is tight, and how do you see that contest impacting your 8th district campaign? And the second part, if you and Governor Romney are elected, how do you see yourself remaining independent to serve the people of the 8th district?
The Chicago Tribune endorsement was actually very interesting. I wrote down a title after I read it. The Chicago Tribune basically said, Tammy Duckworth's not ready to be a congressman, comma, but I don't like Joe Walsh, comma, so we're going to endorse Tammy Duckworth. Tammy, Ms. Duckworth, this amazes me that you continue to say this, that elections don't matter. And if I heard you right, maybe we can save ourselves a lot of time and trouble on November 6th. It doesn't matter whether we elect Mitt Romney or Barack Obama. It doesn't matter whether we elect Joe Walsh or Tammy Duckworth. I got to tell you, I know I'm just a freshman in Congress. I've been there only 2 years. Darn near every Republican and Democrat I know works really hard. It's not an easy job. Every Republican and Democrat I know, Tammy, in Washington, rolls up their sleeves and gets things done. But you know what? Ideas matter. And whether Mitt Romney is your president or Barack Obama is your president, some very different things are going to happen. If Mitt Romney is the president, we're going to repeal Obamacare. If Barack Obama is president, we will never repeal Obamacare. Elections, hey, Republican or Democrat, whatever side you're on, everybody works hard in Washington. Ideas matter. This is the 3rd or 4th time Tammy said this. It doesn't matter who speaker is. The very first vote you're going to make, Tammy, when you're in Washington is you're going to vote for Nancy Pelosi as Speaker, as you should. It does matter who's Speaker, and it does matter who's President. This is why we have this debate on these ideas.
Thank you, Mr. Congressman, thank you. My next question is to you, Congressman. Political Science 101, which I teach, tells us that a re-election campaign is basically a campaign based on the incumbent's record. You are defending your record, the challenger is challenging your record. My question to you, give me 2 specific issues, emphasis on the word specific, that you believe make you the best person to represent the new 8th district. 2 specific issues.
The 2 issues I'll give you are the debt ceiling and a balanced budget amendment. Look, I'm asked this question a lot. Because a lot of people have issues with the fact that as a country, we have been fighting for the last couple of years. And again, I don't run away from anything I've said before. Republicans and Democrats, I'm glad we're fighting right now. This country we all love has been asleep for a number of years. And we've let this country that we all love get to a point where we're $16 trillion in debt. Every baby born in Rolling Meadows tonight, folks, has about $60,000 of debt on top of his or her head. This is an important debate we're having. The very first bill I introduced in Congress last spring was a balanced budget amendment to the Constitution, which says just really simply, government, you can't spend more every year than what you take in. God, that seems like a simple concept, doesn't it? Every family tries to live that way. Some of us struggle. Every family tries to live that way. Most state governments are supposed to do that. Illinois, of course, is the exception. It's an important concept. Nothing right now is more important than the fact that this country is broke and it's stopping everything. Final thing I'll say is, yeah, we've made a lot of noise the last couple of years. But you know what? This country's raised the debt ceiling 20-some times in the last 16 years. Be honest with me. How many people 8 years ago knew what the debt ceiling was? The entire country now knows what the debt ceiling is because we went there to try to stop all of this spending. And whether the next president is Mitt Romney or Barack Obama, I can tell you what, they're going to have a hard time raising $1 more of debt on the backs of our kids or our grandkids because thankfully we helped educate the American people this year.
Thank you, Ms. Duckworth. The question to you to respond to Congressman Walsh, is you could talk specifically about the two issues he raised, or what two specific issues, if you're elected, are you going to stress if you're the congressperson from the 8th Congressional District?
Well, the two issues that I'm going to stress if I am the representative of the 8th Congressional District are the ones that the constituents have told me time and time again in the 18 months that I've been campaigning throughout the district. It's the same thing. Tammy, we need you to maintain the guarantee of Social Security and Medicare. Not once in the 18 months that I've led private district have I had a senior come up to me and say, please, Tammy, turn it into a voucher program like the congressman wants. Please, Tammy, put me out on the streets and charge me up to $6,000 more and get rid of that prescription medicine benefit. Please, Tammy, let me go negotiate on my own with the insurance companies because, you know, I think I could get a better deal just all by myself with a $600 coupon. So maintaining the guarantee of Social Security and Medicare is vital to the district. The other issue is to really talk about what we need to do to bring jobs back to the district, to invest in the transportation infrastructure of this district, to invest in our small businesses who've said to me time and again, we need certainty in Washington. We don't need any more of the gridlock. And since Mr. Walsh did quote the Tribune, I will quote it back to him, and they said that they have endorsed me because he has fueled the political vitriol that has paralyzed Washington, that nearly shut down the federal government, that has failed to produce meaningful fiscal reform and economic recovery. If you want something to happen, then you need to vote for me, and you need to make sure that we elect a Congress that is moderate, one that will work with.
Thank you, Ms. Duckworth. Thank you very much. Time for the first broadcast break. We'll take a break and we'll come back and the panelists will be the next round of questions. Okay, who has a question for Congressman Walsh? Congressman, you'll have 2 minutes to answer. Ms. Duckworth, you'll have 1 minute and 30 seconds to respond. Dick, you're on.
Thank you, Paul. Congressman, you started out by talking about your opponent and some of the things she's been saying. You've been saying a lot on the campaign trail, too. You talked about, you called President Obama's son, said pat him on the head, pick him up, tell him he should go back, he doesn't know how to be president. You said your opponent is not a hero because all she does is talk about her war record. You talked about all she needed to do was pick her dress for the Democratic Convention. You suggested that she just shouldn't be in this race because all she's done is talk about her war record when people like John McCain didn't talk about his war record even though he wrote 3 books. But Congressman, I wonder if, as your opponent says, you're too extreme.
Do you have 2 minutes to respond to that?
Boy, Dick, any more?
You're on Walsh's time. Congressman, go ahead.
Mr. K, I bet you do. Quick response to Tammy, though. Tammy, you've got to understand, and I know you do, that Medicare right now will disappear within 8 to 10 years if we don't do anything to it.
May I ask you a response to my question?
Oh, I thought I've got the mic.
Yes, you do have the mic, but try and respond to the question.
I sure will. Now, Mr. K, to your question. I don't know about you, but I think your profession, and I think darn near everybody in this audience, is sick and tired, and I'll say it with a smile, of Republicans and Democrats, elected officials, who seem to poll test every syllable of every word that they utter because they're so afraid of offending people and losing votes. You're seeing the perfect example, Dick, of that up here on this stage. Tammy Duckworth will not say a thing that David Axelrod and her advisors won't let her say or advise her. One other final point. I never, ever, Dick Kay, said that Tammy Duckworth wasn't qualified to run for Congress, and I never said she wasn't a hero. Anybody that wears that... Last point. I was marching in a parade in Schaumburg Sunday, 2 days before the Democratic Convention, when Tammy Duckworth was on a stage down in Charlotte, if you can look at the picture, picking out a dress for her speech Tuesday night. That's what I was doing.
Okay, thank you, Congressman Walsh. Remember, this is a serious discussion on the issues facing the 8th Congressional District. Ms. Duckworth, you have a minute and a half to respond.
Well, I think that Congressman does what he always does, which is try to distract the discussion from the real issues that are at hand. And yes, I do sometimes look at the clothes that I wear, but you know, for most of my adult life, I've worn one color. It's called camouflage. Substance, shall we? There's $50 billion in Medicare fraud a year. There is $41 billion in subsidies to oil and gas industries that we can cut. $372 billion in fraudulent DOD or DOD contracting, and that is procurement contracts that are not properly supervised. There's $385 billion in an F-35 Joint Forces Striker jet that we cannot afford. $155 billion for companies like General Electric that don't pay their fair share. There's $1 trillion in cuts that I just proposed, and then add to that $1 trillion of people making more than $1 million. There's another trillion, so there is $2 trillion that I'm proposing right now. That's a start. It's not enough. We cut where we need to cut, but we do not cut Medicare. We do not do this on the back of seniors. We do not get rid of the guarantee, because this is what the people of the 8th Congressional District have told me they want. This is about serving the district. It's not about who's going to be Speaker of the House and who's going to be President. It's about serving the people of the 8th Congressional District.
Thank you. To bring us all together, Mr. Cochran, you have a question for Ms. Duckworth, and she'll have 2 minutes to respond.
Ms. Duckworth, I think a lot of people here are in the same boat that I am, and many are, that you've got kids that have graduated from college or about to graduate from college that can't find work or are underemployed. You've spoken about Pell Grants and expanding Pell Grants, but as you know, most economists in the country will tell you that the student loan crisis in this country will be as bad, or if not worse, than the housing bubble. And we've got to pay our bills. And the question is, how do we pay our bills? So if you could, talk about how we would pay for an expansion in Pell Grants. And also, a listener here tonight from your district wrote me to say that he and his wife are in the education business, and they've tried very hard to do the right thing, but they now hold almost as much student loan debt equivalent to the mortgage on their house. So two-part question. How do you pay for the expansion in Pell Grants, and what will you do to stop the impending doom of a student loan crisis, a bubble like the housing bubble when it popped?
Well, I think that what we need to do first and foremost is to look at the priorities we have in this country. I think we need to invest in education. We need to protect the guarantee of Medicare, and then we cut where we can't afford to cut. If you cannot afford to buy books or prescription medicine, why would you still continue to go to the movies? That's why I propose cuts in places like defense spending, and these are not going to be easy cuts. You know, we want the F-35 Joint Forces Striker aircraft, but we just can't afford it right now. We cannot be looking at giving tax cuts to people who make more than $1 million, another $1 trillion, when we are facing these crises. You cut where you need to cut, but you protect those things that invest in our future, that invest in our most vulnerable, and also invest in our businesses. One of the things that we can do, you know, talking about the children who are looking to find work, we've done some great programs here in the 8th Congressional District. Harper College has a lot of students who live in the district who reach out to the businesses and community colleges to have the training programs so kids can actually get internships while they're in school, and then they go straight into jobs. We also need to make sure we invest in our small businesses. Let's give them a tax cut for hiring people who've been unemployed for more than 6 months. Let's give them a tax cut for helping train the next generation of workers. But we cannot do this if we don't pay for it by cutting where we need to cut. And I think we need to go after the waste that's happening in government. I talked about defense spending. $9 million a day wasted in unsupervised defense contracts. We simply cannot do that anymore.
Congressman Walsh, you have 1 minute and 30 seconds to respond. The question was basically our Pell Grants and student loans, but...
I got it, Paul, thanks. Look, I know this is tough. I know this is tough. It's tough for Ms. Duckworth, it's tough for a lot of us. It's probably tough for everybody in this audience. We have a government that does too much for too many of us. Tammy talked about saving $9 million a day with defense cuts. This is a 2-hour debate. Just so everybody in the audience knows, your government will have borrowed $340 million during this 2-hour debate. $340 million. We borrow $4 billion every single day. Now look, it's so easy, believe me, it must be easy, to sit up here and say, I'm going to promise you this, I'm going to promise you that, I'm going to promise you a college education, contraceptive for everybody, Pell Grants for everybody. We never think... We don't think at all about what these things cost. And you know what we never do? We never think about the fact that some of these things won't be around for our kids and our grandkids. And I'm going to come back to this point. To not do anything about Medicare is to end it as we know it. Tammy Duckworth doesn't have a plan. So, if Tammy's plan, if Ms. Duckworth's plan is, don't do anything to Medicare, keep it just like it is, that is a death sentence for Medicare, and I'm not going to do that to your kids and your grandkids. That's wrong.
Thank you, Mr. Walsh. The battle goes on. Dick Kay, a question for Lieutenant Colonel Duckworth. She will have 2 minutes to answer. Mr. Walsh, you'll have 1 minute and 30 seconds to respond.
Lieutenant Colonel, coming back to the Medicare argument, do you believe that Medicare or those going forward should be put on a voucher system?
Absolutely not, Dick. And I think that I need to make something very, very clear. Mr. Walsh has misstated what I just said. And he said that I did not provide any solutions. I said we actually need to look at the $50 billion in Medicare fraud. I just already provided $2 trillion in proposed cuts. I've not heard anything from him. Let me give you some more details. $80 billion. Let's look at the pay for delay program, which large pharmaceuticals pay generic drug manufacturers to not bring drugs onto the market. That's $24 billion. Letting Medicare negotiate for lower drug prices, something that we did at VA, something that's here at the Department of Veterans Affairs in Illinois, another $20 billion in savings. We can find savings, but voting 3 times for the Ryan budget that cuts and ends Medicare as we know it and doesn't even mention the word veterans once, that is what will end Medicare. It's Mr. Walsh. It is not because he's doing anything about it, it's because he's letting it end. We need to find real solutions, and the way we find real solutions is to sit down, look at the problem that we have, and figure out a way. I've already put forward over $2 trillion in proposed things we can look at. I've not heard a single thing from Mr. Walsh other than to speak in very general details and blame those people in Washington. If there's a problem in Washington, you are the status quo, Congressman. You've been there for 2 years.
That's actually amazing.
Wait a second. Are you done, Ms. Duckworth? Okay.
Keep going.
Moving along. Mr. Walsh, you have 1 minute and 30 seconds to respond.
Tammy Duckworth's the only person who's called me the status quo. That's actually amazing. Tammy, but again, I'm confused, and it may be me, it may be you. You talk about ending the Bush tax rates for people who make $1 million or more. What CBO tells us is that will generate about $5 billion in revenue over the course of 10 years. Again, I just want to say, your government borrows $4 billion a day. That alone won't even pay for 2 days worth of our debt. You've said this before, I don't know where you get this $1 trillion that's going to raise.
Keep going.
I'll I was going to see my time.
Well, the next round we'll have a little interaction, so just, you can finish up, you have 37 seconds.
And again, no one's ever accused me of not being specific on where I would cut. Look, I would get rid of the Department of Education tomorrow. Our boys and girls home from Afghanistan tomorrow. I would be serious about reforming our entitlements. I know Tammy wants to ignore these so that our kids and grandkids can avail themselves of them.
Thank you, Congressman. Our last question of this round will be Steve Cochran for a question for Congressman Walsh. Congressman Walsh, you'll have 2 minutes to answer. Ms. Duckworth will have 1 minute and 30 to respond.
Congressman, on the way in tonight, CNN reported that the State Department decided, whoopsie, they just realized there were no spontaneous protests at the consulate in Benghazi. Somehow they missed that. When it comes to Congress, you don't make foreign policy, but you do have control in, as much as possible over who gets paid and over foreign aid. What would you do and what will you do to push changes in foreign aid to countries that clearly have a problem with the USA?
I led a letter in early August. I think about 30 or 40 of my colleagues joined me, mostly Republican, I believe a couple Democrats. It was a letter to our administration demanding that we cut off aid to Egypt after the Muslim Brotherhood took control of Egypt. Demanding that we cut off aid to Egypt unless they abide by the long-standing treaties with the State of Israel. Here's my thought. If a country can't keep a U.S. embassy or a U.S. consulate safe, that U.S. consulate or U.S. embassy should not be in that country. If a country in the Middle East cannot contain and control the radical elements in that country, we will cut off aid to that country immediately. What happened in Libya is a stark and a tragic reminder, again, and it's a shame that we need as a country to be constantly reminded of this. There are evil people around the world trying to kill Americans and our way of life. And Steve, I don't know about you, but I found the media so disappointing because they were obsessed with Governor Romney's reaction after what happened in Libya without looking at the fact that clearly on an anniversary of 9/11, we were not prepared for what our government now admits was a calculated, planned terrorist attack. A committee that I sit on, Government Oversight and Reform, is having a hearing tomorrow in Washington to examine these issues. We sent a letter to Secretary of State Hillary Clinton because we now know our officials at the consulate in Libya asked us for extra security and they were denied that extra security. We have got to remember that we are at war and we need Americans protected. And I'll tell you something, we're broke. We should cut off foreign aid to darn near every country except always stand with the state of Israel.
Thank you, Mr. Ms. Walsh, you have 1 minute and 40 seconds to respond.
Actually, it's Ms. Duckworth, but that's okay.
I'll never make that.
There's actually something that Mr. Walsh and I agree on, which is that Israel is our greatest ally in the Middle East. We must stand with Israel. It is the only true democracy in the Middle East, and we must be firm and we must be with them. And so, in all things that I look at, we will keep all options on the table. But we're going to have a real discussion. We're going to have a real discussion about America's involvement abroad. You know, I do remember that we are at war. I also think that we need to make sure that when we expend American resources, and by that I mean the precious resources of the men and women who wear the uniform of this great nation, that we expend it responsibly and we know what we're getting into. And so I am very concerned with what happened in Libya. I am also concerned that a lot of the reactions that took place took place before we knew what the situation was, and it came from both the president's and Mr. Romney's campaign offices. I was disappointed in both sides. That was not a time for counting political coup. It was not a time for the Romney campaign to put out anything. It was not a time for the Obama campaign to put out anything. Americans were being attacked. It is a time for us to band together, because the rest of the world, when we issue statements, they don't see Democrat, they don't see Republican, they see American. And when America is attacked, we unite. We form one group and we stand and we oppose terrorism wherever it is in the world. And we certainly do not divide ourselves, ever.
We'll be back live from the Meadows Club in Rolling Meadows. It's the debate time for Congressman Walsh and Lieutenant Colonel Duckworth. For the 8th between Congressman Joe Walsh and Lieutenant Colonel Tammy Duckworth. We're live at the Meadows Club in Rolling Meadows. I'm Paul Green from Roosevelt University, and I'm joined on stage by WIND Steve Cochran and WCPT Dick Kay. In this segment, we are going to have the panelists ask questions. I want to urge you to, those of you out there, to text questions for the next round after this, because we'll have one more round after this. So text your questions. Marcus over there is working really hard to get all these text questions down. And we're going to do this, maybe get a little more questions. I'll give each candidate a minute and 30 seconds, if that's okay with the timekeeper. My only question for this round is to both candidates. The rumor has it I've been around for a while. One of the things that always amazes me when candidates are running for office are all the things that people plan to do away with. And if everyone realizes that a lot of people in Congress are really smart, why haven't they done it? I mean, all these cuts and everything. Let's start off with you, Congressman Walsh. You're in there as the incumbent. Why haven't these things been done? Saving all this money. My God, we could be in Fat City.
Paul, that's a great question. And the answer is that most politicians, Republican and Democrat, look, everybody, it's taken us, again, a long time to get into this mess where this great, good country isn't working, we're not growing, and we're broke. And if we don't make some big grown-up decisions really quickly, our kids and our grandkids are going to live a life of indentured servitude. It's taken us a while to get into this mess. And the reason, Paul, we're in this mess, the reason politicians typically don't do anything about these problems is because all they want to do is get reelected. All they want to do is get reelected. So every election, everybody in my profession, we walk around every 2 years or 4 years, we continue to promise people things, because admit it, folks, it's like we've trained our politicians to act like SEALs. We've trained them that if they give us things, we'll reward them with votes. And so we continue to do that. That's what President Obama's doing this year. That's what Ms. Duckworth's doing this year. That's what a lot of politicians do, because all they want to do is get reelected. Rare but important is, and I guess I'm optimistic, because we're beginning to elect politicians. There are 87 Republicans in my freshman class. Most of these men and women have never run for office before, and most of these men and women don't need to be in Congress.
Thank you, Mr. Thank you.
That's a healthy.
Ms. Duckworth, your response?
Well, the only person here who's trying to get reelected is Mr. Walsh. So let's talk about Mr. Walsh's proposal to end the Department of Education. He's talked a lot about our children's future, but I don't think ending the Department of Education and getting rid of all Pell Grants, all affordable education, and all standards at the national level is the solution. I've already proposed a few things, and the things that I propose are also based on my experience. At the Department of Veterans Affairs, when we started there, here in Illinois, the Illinois VA was on its own formulary and could not negotiate for cheaper drug prices. So I moved it under the federal VA system, and we were able to save money because we were able to get a cost saving. So there's something that we were able to accomplish. At the federal VA, we also were able to reduce the waste in procurement of software projects that were over budget, over time, and not producing what needed to be produced. We were able to do that and save the taxpayers over $30 billion in just the 3 years that we were there. So there are things that can be done, but they cannot be done when you have members of Congress yelling and screaming at each other and being gridlocked. I actually think that Speaker Boehner, when he came forward with a budget deal at $750+ billion, was giving a genuine effort, and that President Obama should have accepted it. But instead, playing into the gridlock that was happening and the hyper-partisan rhetoric,
Thank you, Connie.
we rejected it, and we're worse off for it.
Okay.
More cooperation is what we need.
15-second response from both of you. Mr. Walsh, 15 seconds that you're standing there at the door preventing any compromise. How do you respond?
It's taken us 60 years to get to this point where we're broke, we're not growing, and we're unemployed. We haven't gotten here because Republicans and Democrats haven't gotten along. They've gotten along just fine because all they want to do is get elected. We've got to stop that.
Ms. Duckworth, all those cuts you mentioned, all those billions of dollars on the F-35, if those are so easy to cut, why haven't they been cut?
I think that they're not easy to cut, but I think that the only way you're going to make any headway is to work with one another and not to shout and scream. I don't think that saying that I'm going to stop the president, I'm going to vote against him, I'm going to vote against this, I'm going to vote against that, without actually saying that I'm willing to compromise and work with one another is the way to go. I think what the people want is real effort to compromise and find a way to cut the things that we can afford to cut and save the things that we need to save.
Thank you, Ms. Duck. Thank you very much.
One of the problems with this race and others is money, and the Supreme Court United decision. You talk about the kind of money that's being pumped into this campaign. Mr. Walsh is being supported by a PAC called Now or Never. It is run by a Texan who used to work in the Republican group down there, and they shifted their work to Missouri, I believe. They didn't get their way in Missouri, and so I have a question.
Let him ask the question. I'm sure it's coming.
If you believe that we need to end this gridlock, why don't you go tell your leaders, such as Mitch McConnell and others, and say, why did you, on the very first day the president was elected, say that our mission now is to stop this president? Okay. Why don't you talk to people like John Boehner, who said all deals are off the table?
All right, there you go. Minute and a half. Go for it.
And I got to be honest, okay, I didn't understand the question, so I'm going to let that go. There's plenty of money on both sides. There are groups around the country who believe in limited government who are supporting me. There's George Soros and other people around the country. Money's not the problem. Here's the issue. Ms. Duckworth, you continue to talk about your record at the Illinois VA. You ran the Illinois VA for 2 years. You were cited 12 times during those 2 years for non-compliance with state law, for breaking state law, for mismanaging and abusing tax dollars. The person who appointed you, Governor Blagojevich, had a history of using his office for political gain. You were busted for driving a campaign vehicle to an official event. In fact, right now there are currently 2 current Illinois VA employees who are suing you for wrongful termination, among other things citing you for the fact that their direct supervisor was allowed.
Let him finish. You can't have a debate if you're yelling. Go ahead.
Tammy, two VA employees came to you because they said their supervisor was allowing campaigning to go on VA grounds, and they asked you, a clear violation of state law, and they asked you to do something about it. You fired one of them, upgraded the other one. I want to ask you a question. Why would you use your power at the Illinois VA to campaign in government resources, and why did you take it out on the whistleblowers?
Ms. Duckworth, you have a minute.
Well, first and foremost, that's not true, and you continue to say things repeatedly that are not true. You hope that if you say them over and over again, and they thinking that they would be true, and they're not. This is what Mr. Walsh does. He tries to distract people from the issue at hand. Have you heard him say anything about his proposals to cut the budget with real numbers other than the Department of Education? No. If you want to make this about finances and being sued by former employees, we can talk about the fact that you were sued by your former campaign manager for not paying him his salary. So let's not go there. Let's not go there. But let's talk about, I think the people of the 8th Congressional District need to know what the solutions need to happen in Washington, D.C. What we're going to do to get this country moving again. And he does this all the time. He says things that are simply not true. He says half-truths, and he repeats them over and over again, and he tries to distract the conversation from the issues at hand. The fact that he wants to end Medicare and Social Security, as we know, he's called them Ponzi schemes. He's just called for ending the Department of Education. He's come up with no proposals, any concrete way for actually reducing the budget. So far, I've made about 8 suggestions. You've not heard anything from him, and all he does is try to distract you. What you said, Mr. Walsh, is simply not true, and that is not the case.
Tammy, are you currently being sued by 2 VA employees, yes or no?
That is it. I think that, again, he is... Mr. Walsh continues to distract people from the issues at hand.
Tammy, just yes or no?
The moderator has to step in. Hold it, guys. We don't want to pass out the togas. Now, come on, relax. If she doesn't want to answer, or that's her answer, that's fine. To bring us together, Steve Cochran.
I hate to break this party up. However, I want to bring up most of your favorite, most of the folks in the room, your favorite word, Obamacare. And it's a question for both of you. Congressman Walsh, you said that you would repeal it. Ms. Duckworth, back in February in the Chicago Tribune, they quoted you as saying you didn't think Obamacare went far enough. Congressman Walsh, can you tell me what your plans are with repeal?
Okay, let Ms. Duckworth lead off.
Absolutely. So the small business owners in my district have told me that they shouldn't even be in the business of providing health care. It does make them less competitive with businesses overseas. The biggest problem with Obamacare is the uncertainty. And Mr. Walsh, he says that he's not the status quo, yet he's voted 37 times to try to repeal Obamacare. That does not get us anywhere. What we need to do is have an honest discussion about the good parts and the bad parts with Obamacare. Number one, I think people like that children with pre-existing conditions are covered. I think seniors like that they're covered. Women like that they're not a pre-existing condition. There are many good things. Let's keep those. Let's fix the bad parts. I think that there are real problems with Obamacare. Businesses with low employee numbers and low profit margins, over 50 and low profit margins, are really at risk. So let's get to work. And I'm willing to work with anyone who wants to sit down with me and figure out a way to fix that. But the solution to solving Obamacare is not to have a 38th vote, because that just adds more uncertainty. Let's get to work, let's fix the parts that need to be fixed. Let's be honest that there are problems with it, but let's keep the things that are good. I do think that businesses need certainty. Businesses should not be in the business of providing health care, because it does make them less competitive. But what we need to do is get healthcare to people now. I don't think that we're going to have healthcare off the backs of businesses for decades and decades to come. The problem we have right now is businesses don't know what's going to happen because of the gridlock in Washington. Because folks like Mr. Walsh continue to talk about Obamacare,
okay, Ms.
trying to repeal it, and it gets us nowhere.
Thank you. Mr. Walsh, you have a minute and 50 seconds to respond.
Okay, quickly, to correct the record, Ms. Duckworth, the House of Representatives voted twice to repeal all of Obamacare. Republicans and Democrats came together on a number of occasions to repeal and defund certain aspects, but we voted twice to repeal the whole thing. And
how many times
Mr.
did aspects? 33,
some of those,
34, 35?
Some of those restaurant owners that you talked to, namely the owners of Chicago Prime Steakhouse in Schaumburg, who you met with a couple weeks after I met with them, they were very clear that if Obamacare is not repealed, their business will close down. Tammy, you can't walk this back. You've said repeatedly that Obamacare didn't go far enough. You believe in universal government-run health care. I want you to this is what's tough about elections. Take pride in that stance. Believe in it. Look at your side. They love it. Believe in that. Don't just because you want to get elected in a month, don't try to moderate your position. You've said repeatedly. What we know is, the beautiful thing about Obamacare is, it's all right in front of us. Our job creators, the real people in this country that matter, tell us it's the number one reason why they're not hiring. We already know that the debt estimates now are 2 to 3 times what it was expected to cost. We already know that doctors are leaving the profession. We already know that private insurance is going to go belly up. Republicans and Democrats need to repeal Obamacare and come together.
Calm down. I think some of you missed it.
You do all know.
Mr. Walsh, are you going to send Ms. Duckworth a bill for that free advice, or is that free advice? Who said the moderator can't bring people together? Okay, now that we're all quiet and sullen, Dick Kay, you've been quiet for a while.
I just want to follow up on that. I want to follow up on the issue of health care. I want to know, if you repeal Obamacare, what do you do with the 2 million people who are already taking advantage of Obamacare? What do you do with those people who have pre-existing conditions who would be kicked off if you repeal Obamacare? What do you do with all of those young men and women who are able to stay on the policy until...
Dick, he only has 1 minute and 30 seconds.
Well, I'm sorry, but this is an issue. What do you replace that with? How do you tell them they are off the road?
Did you get the question, Congressman?
That's my question.
Okay.
What do you do?
Give him a chance, Dick. Give him a chance. He has a minute. How's this for that question? Let's raise the stakes.
Who am I to say that I don't love the passion? I love the passion. Look, Dick Kay, there are 47 million uninsured people in this country. Now the latest estimates are that with Obamacare after 10 years, there'll be 30 million uninsured people in this country. What has that done for us? Do you know, Dick, that already most states and many corporations on their own have policies covering kids on their parents' plan until they're 26 or 29? Most states already have laws dealing with pre-existing conditions. We did not need to reinvent a sixth of this economy, remake a fifth of this economy to do things that have already been done. Republicans and Democrats can come together on patient-centered reforms, letting people buy insurance across state lines, tort reform, increasing programs like health savings accounts, where we actually put more Americans in charge of their own health care costs. And again, folks, we have 10,000 Americans retiring every day. We're now living until we're 92 and 3 and 4. That's a great thing. But this country, God love us, we're afraid to have a serious conversation about how to pay for all that. Tammy Duckworth's not going to have that conversation. If we let Medicare alone, let Medicare alone, it will wither up and die within 8 to 10 years. We can't let that happen.
Ms. Duckworth, you have 2 minutes to discuss that and respond.
Well, I think Mr. Walsh should be proud of the 37 votes that he voted to repeal Obamacare, not back away from it himself. Your side team seems to like that. And I did meet with Chicago Prime Steakhouse after you did, and they told me something not quite what you said, and perhaps when you were there, you just talked at them and didn't listen. What they said to me was this. They said that there's great uncertainty with Obamacare because of the gridlock in Washington, and they don't know if the law is going to be put into place and how, and if I could please work on that. They also said that because they have 53 or 54 employees, and they have a low profit margin, they will probably have to fire 3 or 4 people to get below that 50 employee mark, and that they did not want to do that. And could I please work on that? And I said, absolutely. I think that that is a legitimate point of a businessman who's saying, can you help me? Can you work across the aisle and fix the law so that businesses like mine are covered in some way so that it doesn't cost me more money, so that my employees are covered for health care. That's what they want. They don't want, they did not say, Tammy, please vote for a 38th time and create more uncertainty. What they said was, Tammy, I need you to get to work and find ways to get to work. And that is exactly what I'm going to do. Hey, Paul, I think,
Joe, we have 20 seconds to respond.
I have a wager for Miss Duckworth. Miss Duckworth, why don't you and I next week, this upcoming week, let's you and I together sit down with the owners of Chicago Prime Steakhouse and ask them, let's ask them up or down what they'd like to do with Obamacare. And if they don't tell you and I that they'd love to see Obamacare repealed, I will contribute $2,500 to your campaign. I'm actually serious.
Ms. Duckworth, 20 seconds to respond.
I think that you've seen classic Joe Walsh grandstanding. Talk about the issues and what we're going to do. And notice that he actually ignored the fact that he's voted 37 times against Obamacare. And then he is actually looking at one business, and he's actually putting words in the mouths of that business and say that they want us to have this. Look, we need to have real discussions about what needs to happen. And I'm not going to grandstand with you, Joe. I'm not going to grandstand with you because it's time. Let me finish. It's time for serious talk and serious action, and not.
Damn it. Okay. A very short question and a very short answer from both of you, which is talk about Don Quixote. Go ahead.
The question's going to take a longer answer. Can we carry the answer over the break? All I want to do
is... The moderator can do what he wants.
All right, good. Question is jobs. I want to stay in the 8th. You guys both mentioned Chicago Prime Steakhouse. And the people you've met in the 8th on both sides, I want you to tell me a story, an anecdote, if you will, about a business you met that's struggling and what you would push for in Congress to help them hire new people immediately. Not a list, but your #1 priority that you would push for to create jobs in the 8th.
That is such an important question. That requires such a lot of thought. And both of you will have the chance to answer it after we take a 5-minute break.